Cool. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Salt Lake City School District Board of Education meeting. Today is September 3rd, 2024. Before we open the public meeting, there is a need for a closed executive session for the school board, and I would entertain a motion.
I can make that motion.
Thank you, Brian.
On September 3rd, 2024, I move that the board go into closed executive session to discuss number one, the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual. Two, pending or imminent litigation. And three, the deployment of security personnel, devices, or systems.
All right, is there a second to the motion?
And second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Vice President Williams.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
And Jenny, did you want to make a vote? Are you in a spot to do so? All right. Nonetheless, the motion passes, and we'll go ahead and prepare the room. Thank you. Technology. All right, we're good to go. Thank you, everybody, for giving us a few extra minutes to reconvene outside of our closed session and here for the public meeting. I want to welcome everybody to this Salt Lake City School District Board of Education business meeting. Today is September 3rd, 2024. We do have a few folks that are out. So we have Dr. Grant, our superintendent, Board Member Bade, and Board Member Sika, who are joining us remotely this evening. So I just want to make sure that we acknowledge them and their participation tonight. And I also want to make sure that we acknowledge our association presidents this evening. For Buildings and Grounds, we have President Elio Ocampo. Child Nutrition, we have President Tanya Slaughter. Thank you for being with us tonight. Transportation, President Chris Krogh. And from the Salt Lake Education Office of Professional Associations, or SLEOPA, we have George O'Connor. From SLEA, Salt Lake Education Association, we have President Mike Harmon and Vice President Chelsea Acosta. Thank you for always being here. And for the Salt Lake Association of School Administrators, LASA, our president is Adrian Labato, but we are represented tonight by Tracy Vandeventer. Thank you for being here tonight, Tracy, for all the work that you do with all the schools and your role as network director. Up next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance, and Vice President Williams will lead us in.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Our recognition this evening is one that the board and our team would like to thank April Johnson, who's moving on to greener pastures and new opportunities. April, on behalf of the board, thank you for all the work that you do and did for the Salt Lake City School District and your support to the board. Just thank you and good luck in your new endeavors. All right, moving into our next agenda item is the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the items on the consent agenda as approved.
I have a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Sika joining us remotely.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, no.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, no.
Bryce Williams, yes.
All right, that motion passes. Thank you, Board. Our next agenda item is our request to speak. Let me make sure I get my my statement that the board has asked me to read. I should have had that out earlier. I'm super sorry for not. Okay, got it right in front of me, of course. All right, speaker guidelines for public comment to be read by the board president. The board enjoys the opportunity to hear from the public during the comment portion of its meetings. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to remind you of our board rules governing your comments. 1, the total time reserved for public comment is not to exceed 15 minutes, with all speakers or groups limited to 3 minutes. The board will not allow public comments during board meetings that are slanderous, obscene, or otherwise violate state or federal law. 3, employees and/or their representatives may not use the public comment period to address issues that should be raised through existing formal communication channels or established grievance or negotiation procedures. I'd also like to explain that unless the speaker's topic is already on the agenda, state law prohibits the board from taking action on items raised during the public comment period. However, if it seems appropriate to the circumstances, I may direct district staff to follow up with the speaker on the topic discussed. All right, our first speaker this evening is Ana Isabeles. Ana, I don't see her here. We'll bump back up there if she does show up in the meantime. Amanda Longwell is our second speaker signed up for this evening. I don't see Amanda in here. Our third, Natalie Brooks. Natalie, please join us up at the table. Thank you.
Thanks for having
Mind
me.
just pulling that microphone down a little bit so
Yeah.
folks can hear you online? Thank you.
Can everyone hear me okay? Thanks for having me here tonight. I am here regarding Hawthorne Elementary School, just wanting to keep the conversation open that the community still cares about the future of that land. I know the school is now closed. A lot of people in our neighborhood, I think, are kind of wondering what's going to happen. Right now, it looks like it's being maintained. That's great. But just no strong suggestions at this point. Just wanted you to know that we're watching and we're concerned and we care. Want to keep public land for the benefit of the public and community, whether that's some kind of, these are all dreams, but arrangements will release it to the city as a park and hold on to that land for the future. If it is end up developed, as it seems like a lot of places end up happening in Salt Lake, having it be middle income housing that's available to purchase, not to developers who are going to make apartments where people can never own, give a pathway to home ownership, whether that's quadplexes, duplexes, whatever it may be. But Hawthorne's also along a very busy road, and suggest that even if it is not wanting it to be developed, but if it is, at least keep some green space there along 700 East, and not have people packed in like sardines right up against the road. But just from my personal hope would be the green space. There's a park there, and that land, the other cities have done things, like I know Granite School District has done things where they release things for very cheap and hold on to it. We don't have to decide right away. Yeah, and that's all, just wanting to keep that conversation started. No, I'm the only one here today from my neighborhood, but there's a lot of people talking about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time. Right, and I don't see Anna or Amanda here yet. So in the interest of time, we'll move on to the reports agenda. Oh, okay. Okay.
Sorry.
So sorry, and what was your name?
I'm Paula Harleen from Preservation, Utah.
Paula, come on up. Thank you.
Thank you for calling that out.
Yeah.
Well, I came out on a rainy night, so I wanted a chance to talk. Okay, I am representing the Advocacy Committee at Preservation, Utah. And in May, we released a list of endangered places, and West High is one of them. After listening via YouTube to the sections of your board meetings this year that address the fate of West High, I have a few observations. First, I'm sorry, I'm going to push back a little bit against Alan, okay? But is the board allowing Alan, your business administrator, and the feasibility study architects to make the decision to demolish West High? I'm sorry if I missed a board discussion about the impact of demolishing West High, but I could not find one. On January 23rd of this year, Alan presented 4 options. The first was to preserve West High at a cost of $412 million. And the other 3 options were basically demolishing West High. Then on July 9th of this year, Alan reported that the architects began preliminary design work in case the bond is passed. He said that the feasibility architects recommend the option that has the lowest price and the least disruption to the students, and hidden in this language is the decision that somehow happened to demolish West High. That's how it seemed to me from listening to the videos. There's no other further discussion about preserving West High, and no one questioned the architect's criteria. Second, another red flag was Alan's comment that, first, every building we have has an end of life, which is not necessarily true from a preservationist point of view. And I also felt that he didn't show very much respect or value for West High. He said, West High is one of the oldest buildings around. A building built in the 1900s doesn't meet today's educational needs. The sooner we can get kids into 21st century buildings, the better. Alan also rejected the idea of spending money to fix the old building, which helps explain why West High facilities are not keeping up. So could I offer quick 3 points? Research shows that demolition is emotionally and physically harmful. Demolishing any neighborhood building, and especially any historic buildings that people are used to seeing, living around, and using, upsets people's sense of well-being and destroys their pride of place. Second, research shows that a rising cause of air pollution in Salt Lake County is construction. Scientific studies recommend that especially children stay away from construction and the accompanying airborne particulate matter. It doesn't seem prudent to place children at a demolition site. Third, Preservation Utah, has just noticed increasing angst among citizens in Salt Lake City from all of the destruction that's going on downtown.
Paula,
And
that is time.
I just wanted to offer to get involved with the bond, involved in your effort to promote the bond, if you could include preservation.
Thank you, Paula. We appreciate your time. All right, and I still am not seeing Amanda or Anna in the room, so we'll move on to our reports agenda. The first item on the reports agenda is a bonding update. Business Administrator Kersley, I'll turn that over to you.
Thank you. So I have just a quick little PowerPoint kind of showing where we are on the timeline. Attached to the agenda was the timeline that was presented back in July. So we're just going to kind of cover what we've done, what are some of the next steps. And as soon as you're ready, Sam, just go to the next slide. So some of the steps that have already been accomplished: on August 8th, the board adopted the election resolution. That resolution, as required by law, was delivered to the lieutenant governor and the election officer. We've posted the notice of public hearing for September 17th at 7 p.m. That's both posted on the Utah Public Notice website as well as the district's webpage, and posted throughout the district at public buildings. In addition, district representatives met with representatives from the Utah Taxpayers Association just to discuss the bond proposal and what it entailed and the effect on taxpayers. Next slide, Sam. So some of our next steps, this September 6th, which is this Friday, is due to the election officer the district's argument in favor of the bond. We're working on that and should have that We'll be reviewing that in the next day or two. We'll have the board review it prior to Friday before we submit it to the election officer. Again, noted that we have a public hearing September 17th. I just want to call out that that will be held at the new district office building in the boardroom, and the address of that is 406 East, 100 South, and that information is also on those public notices. We'll be working on a voter information pamphlet, which will be mailed between September 23rd and October 21st. Next slide, Sam. We also, as part of our regular public meeting on October 1st, allow the presentation of arguments for and against the ballot proposition. And also during the month of October, so we have the voter information pamphlet, but there'll also be other little mailers that we'll send out in the month of October just to inform our constituents about the bond election process. By October 4th, we'll post arguments for and against any rebuttals to the electronic voter information website as well as the district's website, and those will also be included in the district's newsletter. Next slide, Sam. Just want to note that on November 5th is election day, so that's where our bond election will be on the ballot for that election. And then on November 19th, the board will meet in our regular board meeting. As part of that board meeting, canvass the returns. And next slide. I want to note that we have some open houses coming up where public can stop by and ask questions about the bond and the process. Our first one is Thursday, September 12th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the West High School Commons. Second one on Wednesday, October 9th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Edison Elementary in the multipurpose room. And then our third and final open house will be on Wednesday, October 23rd from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. In the Highland High Dean Collette Commons area. We encourage all who want to come and learn more about the bond and its process to attend one of those three open houses, or all three. Next slide, Sam. Any questions?
Brian?
Okay, when I was looking at the timeline that you provided, it also, and I mean, we've looked at this before, but on September 2nd, that was the last day for an eligible voter to file a request with the election officer to prepare an argument in favor or against the bond. Do we know if anything has been filed there?
So in this case, the term election officer sometimes refers to me as business administrator and sometimes refers to the county. Mm-hmm. And when I asked who are they supposed to go to, it says they're supposed to go to me, but they may be sent to the county. Okay. I have not received any either for or against, and I haven't heard from the county that they have either, but we'll reach out to them and just verify that they have or have not.
Okay, so but you haven't heard from the county in case they went there yet?
I have not.
Okay, and then you referred to this in your presentation on September 6th, that's this Friday. The board must submit their argument, and you said that you're preparing it. So the argument is from the board, so there's going to need to be a way for us to all look at this, right?
Yep. So we'll be reviewing that tomorrow and get it to the board, hopefully the end of tomorrow, first part of the next day for kind of your review. We also want to send it to our bond council just to make sure we're following all the rules. So it'll be a fast and furious turnaround on that, but we are working on that and hopefully get that to you as soon as possible.
Okay, so heads up to us, be watching for that.
Thank you, Brian. Christy?
Thank you so much, Alan, for all of that. I think that the open houses will be really important, in the conversations. And again, it's just that we're presenting facts, correct? So I just wanted to make the board aware that tomorrow night at 7 p.m., Alan and I were invited to the Sugar House Community Council, which I think is another avenue for us to open up and see if any of those community councils would like Alan. No, just volunteering him.
Is that tomorrow or Thursday? I thought it was Thursday.
The 4th. You better.
I better check my calendar.
Yeah, you better check your calendar. I think it's the 4th. Yeah, and I think that that's a very active council, like all of you are involved with active councils too, but there were some great questions that were asked in the last meeting, and so I appreciated the chair, Mr. Clark, reaching out to us and asking if we could come and provide some additional information. So don't pass up those opportunities, to provide information out to our community. Thanks, Alan.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, as we meet, as we do the open houses and any other meetings as district employees or board members, all we can do now is present facts. The argument for that we're writing will be kind of our last chance to, try and convince people to vote for the board or the bond, but all other communication will be just factual based.
Thank you. Ashley?
Yeah, I just had a question, listening to the public comment and its relationships to some of the other comments that circulate via email or social media. I wanted to offer you the chance, Alan, to clarify what design work means. And it's my understanding that until we know whether or not the bond campaign is successful, we wouldn't seek specific architectural plans because we're looking to know what financing we have before making decisions. And what I understood initial design work to mean is things like how many students we anticipate having in several years from our demographic reports. How many gyms or computer labs do you need in an average high school? Are lockers even used in new builds anymore? Something I've been wondering. How many plugs does the average classroom need? And these decisions would not be about to what degree buildings or portions of buildings are preserved. So am I understanding that right?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. What we're looking at doing now is sometimes it's called programming. It's not designing the building, but getting kind of some groundwork done. So in the event that a bond does pass in November, we kind of can start quickly on the actual design phase. So no design has happened yet, nor will it happen until after the election day. But exactly what you've talked about, we are working on some programmatic work so we can kind of do some background work first, so we're ready to start the design phase a little quicker.
And then if I'm right about that, the best place to share your viewpoints or get more information with specific questions you'd have about that type of programming or scope would be to go to these open houses.
Go to the open houses,
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Ashley. Are there any other questions or comments for Alan? Thank you, Alan, and board members and community, please take note of the open houses. We'd love to see you there. Community council chairs, if you're watching, please let us know where we can be helpful in your upcoming meetings. Thank you. Up next on our reports agenda is item number 2, unused buildings, site maintenance. I'm not sure. I think Superintendent Grant, you're gonna take this one on, at least to start it off.
We'd like to invite our
Isaac?
Executive Director
Perfect.
of Auxiliary Services, Isaac Asdale, up as well to make some comments on this topic.
Perfect. Thanks, Isaac.
Thank you.
Isaac, how about you go ahead and get us started?
Okay. Thank you for your time tonight. Not sure how many of you have heard about what happened just immediately after, the schools are going to close. This is the date of that. Literally that night we had 2 of the schools vandalized. Either people climbing on the roof and trying to tear the solar panels apart and access the copper for cash, or cutting fences and trying to get access to those facilities. So we knew some of this was going to happen, and before that we had talked about how we were going to appropriately manage these properties. And I just wanted to give you guys an update that there were a lot of concerns about Hawthorne specifically, but most of the schools, there were concerns about them. Hawthorne was kind of a whirlwind of situations. UDOT was doing a project on 700 East. Our irrigation on the main field broke, and then we had the vandalism on the roof that cut our electrical to inside the building. So over about a 3-week period, we had grass turning brown, 700 East was torn apart, and we had a generator running for several weeks to keep the cell sites operational on top of that building. And then at Mary Jackson, we had people cut into our generator and through the fences there trying to get into the building. Just so you're aware, Emlyn Benyon Elementary, we have the SPED division. They have about 20 staff there that are working in and out of there every day. We have the audiology lab that is placed there, and we also have a Head Start with 3 classrooms in there. Head Start actually agreed to cover a custodian to take care of their daily maintenance. What we had planned for is having a custodian rotate through several of these buildings at a time, so they'd be at a couple hours each day at each of the buildings with these other staff in the building. Then Mary Jackson, we have the Child Nutrition Department. We have some professional development meetings and our monthly DLCs with the school administrators that are being held at that facility currently. So we have 10 to 12 people in and out of there on a daily basis. Riley Elementary, we have teaching and learning and professional development, as well as our purchasing team. So between everybody, there's between 8 and 12 people that are in and out of there on a daily basis. And then Hawthorne, we have the social and emotional learning division, fine arts, health, and PE from teaching and learning that are operating out of those facilities each day. Again, there's about 8 people in and out of that facility. The facilities themselves are being maintained. The custodian turns in any work orders they see. We have maintenance staff checking on them each day. The alarms are set. We're checking each entrance and exit, the doors, the fire alarm, cameras to make sure everything is operational. We're doing everything we can to make sure that we keep these facilities looking as good as possible. Our grounds crew are doing their regular maintenance on the facilities. Right now it's about a 3-week turnaround they'll come through, mow the lawn, cut the weeds and everything, and then about 3 weeks later they're there again to do it again. That's for the most part what we're doing at those facilities to keep them looking decent. If there are any questions or concerns that somebody sees at a facility, we encourage them to reach out to the Auxiliary Services Department, notify us so we can get somebody over to look at it. But we also have staff on site on a daily basis.
Thanks, Isaac. Are there any questions for Isaac? Ashley?
I have 2 questions. Obviously, we hear, reports like you've mentioned about vandalism, so we're working to build our trust with community members as we seek long-term uses for facilities. So I'm curious, first of all, how you're handling temporary misuse and how it compares with vandalism we see at schools that are operating, because we know that happens too. And the second question is, if you could speak to how long on average you've noted that districts may take time to make long-term property decisions. So as an example, our neighbors in Granite just decided this summer their final plans for 4 schools that closed approximately 1 year ahead of us. So I'm curious if you would say that, 1 academic year is an approximate norm for making decisions. So, how are we handling misuse of property? How does it measure up to misuse of property on schools that are open? And do you have some type of norm for the timeline in which these long-term decisions might be shaped?
Yeah. So as far as the timeline on any type of project, really it's dependent on the input we get and it's how quickly we can get direction from you as the board in the end. We are working on some ideas to share with the board at some point, but those are all preliminary right now. We're not making any, plans to jump forward. Alan may want to jump in.
I think, a year or more is very reasonable and probably the norm. I mean, these are our properties. We want to make sure we make the right decision versus rush into a decision that we may regret 5, 10, 20 years down the road. So I think it's best to take our time to make these decisions for long-term use and make sure we get it right.
Sorry, what I was trying to say is 1 year is a very quick turnaround time for anything if we had a decision today versus moving forward. And then as far as dealing with the uninvited guests, we try to deal with those as quickly as possible. For example, Mary Jackson had those fences cut one day. They were there fixed that afternoon. Came back the next day, 2 of those were cut again. We had them fixed that day. But the quicker we can get to them and address them, the easier it is to divert those behaviors. I'm sorry, there was a third question.
It was just, as people notice that there may be vandalism on these properties, I've noticed there's vandalism at the schools that in my precinct that are open. So is there a relationship between these buildings being closed as elementary schools and an uptick in vandalism, or do you see this at many other schools? We see it at almost every school throughout the school year, but we did see an uptick because it was literally the night that we said, okay, everybody's out of the building. But for the most part, it's similar to any other facility. But again, I think having people on site is really deterring a lot of those behaviors. And as long as we can do that, the better.
Thank you, Isaac. Christy?
Isaac, thank you so much for coming tonight. I think that this is one of the questions that we're getting a lot about, and then of course, with our request to speak tonight, we also heard about, what's going to be happening, with our buildings. I think that maybe one of the the question I have is what would be the best way for if we have neighbors, that reach out to us or they see, people on site, what's the best process that you would like us to use? And then as a follow-up, do you think it would be worth the time or the cost to put something on the properties that say, if you see da-da-da, call this number or call the police directly, or because I feel like that's what I'm fielding some calls right now about that. And I know that so are the neighbors. They don't really, they don't know who to call. And so I think that if you could give us a little insight to that, that'd be really helpful.
The most important thing is if it's after hours, call the non-emergency police, unless it's an emergency situation.
Okay.
We've Doug Tierlink, who's over our SROs, we've talked with them quite a bit. We've had incidents at other schools of people climbing on the roofs and thinking that that's their play area. And again, they're helping prioritize those responses and dealing with those situations for us. But anytime after hours, that's the best thing you can do. During the daytime, if they see something going on during the daytime, there's people in the building that if they can knock on the door, or better than that would be to call auxiliary services. And we've always got people at the front desk that can take the calls and dispatch facility staff to
That would be
things.
great. So maybe this is directed to the superintendent and to Alan and to possibly Yandri, that we could put that on our front page, of our of the school district's front page, just to say, something to that extent. Here are the numbers for you to call, whether it's before, during business hours, after hours. Here's a process, that we'd like you to follow, and then we would be able to also direct people, that way too. So that would be helpful. Thank you, Isaac.
Thank you.
Christy. Mohammed?
Thank you, Isaac, for reporting those information to us. And just before I proceed with my question, Hawthorne is one of my schools, and I just want to let the communities and families who are listening to know that if you hear any false information about the fact that we've made a decision or who we are talking with or so, I beg of you to not believe that, because as long as I'm sitting here in this board, the community will always be involved, before any decision is made. So just want to make sure that's clear. And so in regards to Isaac, I have a question. So how some areas where they have a live video or police video recordings, I'm wondering, is there something that we could do with the city where, like in those schools that are closed, to have one of those, be placed in one of those properties? That should help, like, deter, especially at night.
That it is another tool that we could look at utilizing. Even though the school is closed, the property is fully functional, meaning we already have our camera system, our alarm system, our fire alarms. All of that is active and working. So that those machines are useful and provide a service. They can detract from some neighborhoods if it's going off late at night or whatnot, but if that's something that the board is interested in, we can look at those options.
I think as we just continue to monitor the situation, and if things we're doing aren't working, we look at other options as well.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, because we just when people see, watch out for dogs or so, the chances of someone walking into that building are slim to none. And if it is like one of those beautiful colors of, the police sirens hanging in there, it will deter, for sure. So it's just something to entertain if we continue to deal with these issues, because, it is unfortunate that there are those who are predators, I would say, waiting on those moments. But I encourage the community to, if they see something, to report, use their video, use their phones or so, whatever need to be happen to report that to us. It'll be great. And thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Are there any other questions for Isaac at this time? All right, seeing none, thank you, Isaac, and thank you for those updates. The third item on our reports agenda, item number 3, is our HR report on vacancies and attrition. Board members, just so you know, as I mentioned when I gave the update on the agendas, this was a topic and an agenda item that was requested through the board's formal formal request process to add an agenda item to the board's public meeting agenda. So I'll turn it over to Logan Hall and Nate Elkins. We share the same name. It's an awesome name. Thank you, Nate, for being here.
I approve of this message.
People always, I just have to say, people always send us messages to me for Nate and messages to Nate probably for me too. So it's just a funny joke. Sorry, y'all.
Absolutely. Well, board members and Alan and Dr. Grant, thank you for this opportunity to provide some updates for this last year. It's been a very, very busy year for the Human Resource Services Office. I just want to be able to give a brief overview of some of the happenings that have taken place in our office, as well as what our current status is for hiring and what things have been happening over the last few months, because it has been a very busy year. Sam, if you could proceed to the next slide. You can see with these large numbers, I mean, we had over 10,000 applications filed just this last school year, from August of last year through August of this year. That's a staggering number with over 1,500 total recommendations to hire, and we hired over 1,400 new candidates into new positions. That includes transfers, but that's a staggering number for a district our size. So a tremendous number of employees who have newly hired or moved positions within the district. So that's kudos to the HR staff. They've been really moving and shaking. As you can see, over 6 hires a day is a staggering number. That's every single day. Our staff is just churning through a very high volume. If you move forward, one more slide. One thing I want to highlight this year is that we have a total of 2,070 benefits eligible employees. This is up by over 100 over the last 2 years. So I want to say kudos to the school board for allowing us to have some more full-time positions that have enabled more employees to have medical benefits available to them. But since we've had a more consistent open enrollment process, we've had more employees signing up for those benefits and having a more seamless process in doing so. This is up over 500 employees from the previous year. So that's a huge gain in making sure that people are familiar with the systems that we're using and giving them opportunities to sign up for the benefits that they are entitled to and want to be able to take advantage of. So those are some really good things there. Moving on to the next slide. Another thing our office has done since the beginning of the summer is we revised and updated our orientation and onboarding experience for the 24-25 school year. The intention really is to help new employees to the district get to know the district, get to understand who we are as an employer, and also start networking across schools so that our new employees get to know each other from different schools across the district on the very first day. This new process what's an improved process, is enabling a more consistent experience for all employees. We want to make sure that they understand what their benefits are like, when, how to check employee online for their pay stubs and be able to make elections for their 401k contributions or anything like that. So there's a general overview because it's important that employees also know who you are as board members and who district leadership is. And so we want to make that a consistent experience, and that really proud to have moving forward. If you move forward one more slide, I want to turn the time over to Mr. Elkins to be able to speak a little bit about this because he deals more directly with our certified hires.
So at any point, if I say something, and just please feel free to stop me and ask questions. I don't want to just spend the next 10 minutes just pontificating, right? So hopefully you can see some of these numbers. I think it's good just to know kind of where we are in terms of the overall total employees of the district, right? So there on the left, you can see we've got 3,736 employees, and then the breakdown between certified and classified. And then over to the right, and this is where I want to spend a little bit of time talking about just general attrition and transfers, kind of get an idea of, on an annual basis, what's happening with our current employees. And so we go back a number of years. You can see starting in 2020 to 2021 school year, that attrition rate that goes from 9%, and then the next school year, 14%, 11%, and 11%. If you're wondering, because I know before I had this position, I had no idea what a healthy attrition rate would be. I would have, I was an English teacher, and then I was an assistant principal and elementary principal. You don't really ever think about, gee, I wonder what a healthy attrition rate would be. Now being in this position, that's something that I consider, right, and I think about. So on average, being somewhere between 10 to 15% is considered a healthy attrition rate for an organization. Anything above 20% is a little worrisome. You have some organizations that just typically operate in a 30 to 40% attrition rate. That's like the restaurant business is a good example of that. They just have constant turnover all the time. So for us, you want to be within that 10 to 15%. Anything below 10%, it would be considered exceptionally good. Depending, there's some subjectivity there, so I don't want to say that that's, a hard and fast rule. But so you can kind of see that we're operating within that 10 to 15% range every year, really for the most part. I mean, 21, 22 is a little bit higher out of the norm than the other school years. But we're kind of sitting pretty well in terms of our employee turnover. Now, I want to also point out, this is just certified employees. We're not looking at the classified, and so I made sure I put the title up there that we're talking about certified. That's, our teachers, our counselors, administrators, nurses, speech paths, on and on. So these are our licensed certified employees. Then the chart right underneath there just gives a quick look at our internal teacher transfers. So each year, right, when we do open the internal transfer window, it's always generally in March. And we just follow the procedures and the written agreement that are outlined for how we handle internal transfers. You can see how many of our teachers transfer from one school to another. And that's all this number is. If you were an elementary teacher at Backman and you transferred to, Indian Hills, that's considered an internal transfer. And so we just calculate the number how many internal movements we had for that year.
Yes.
Christy.
I find this so interesting, because when you look at, if you just look at the 23-24 year, or even the 24-25, and you're saying that we have 1,400 certified teachers right now, and that seems like a really low number, that there's only 42, that have had an internal transfer. Is that normal, like across districts, across the state, or is that just that they're happy where they're at, they don't want to transfer?
That's a good question. I don't know comparability-wise what it would look like at other schools. That's certainly something I could reach out to other HR directors and see if they have. I don't know if they collect that data. I assume they probably do, but I'd be happy to look into it and see if I can get some other district data, at least some of the ones from the Wasatch Front here, and kind of get a comparability number. I think one thing also to keep in mind is every district has different internal transfer policies and procedures. I don't know how ours compares to theirs. Some districts might be really tight on that process. Some districts might be really loose. So that would be kind of interesting, I think, to have that data and then also look at what their policies are in comparison to see if that encourages transfers or if maybe in other districts it's not as encouraged.
Well, I don't know if it directly relates to this, but then with the slide before, when you're talking about how many people applied, to be in Salt Lake, and that you ended up hiring 1,400, people. And I think that still speaks well of Salt Lake District, that people want to work for Salt Lake District, that they want to be a part of, the culture, but also I think that's a good number, at least I think it is, that the transfers, are as low as they are. I mean, it feels like that is it. But it would be interesting to see as you dug into it in your spare time, Nate. you
So
know.
much spare time.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that in my spare time, yeah.
Thank you.
I do think it speaks, we can draw some narratives here, right? I mean, I don't know, I'm just making it assumptions, but a low number generally probably is good. It means that people are probably happy where they're at and they want to continue to be where they're at. That's just one narrative we could make about that, right? So I generally look at it as good when you're looking at the overall number of certified employees, that it is a pretty low percentage that are transferring each year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nate. Ashley?
Yeah, I have a question. Are you going to address this for administrators on a different slide? Or-
I'm not. I actually have that number if you want to, if you're just curious, I can tell you what it
Well,
is.
what I'm curious about is, what Christy was mentioning about establishing a baseline. I heard over the last year a number of concerns about the way internal transfers of administrators were leaving schools at the start of the year. So to understand what I mean, if a principal had retired and someone transferred to take that vacancy, now really there's just a vacancy at a different school. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And people moving around until the start of the year, and there was some sense of frustration, which was probably compounded by, our decision to not let go of any employees due to elementary closures, where things were being balanced in a reasonable way. And it was my intention through some of this report to see if we could establish a baseline of whether we are out of step with the way that those vacancies are handled in other districts, or if in fact this is just a difficult process, right? Where there may be some frustration at the start of the year, but we've noticed all districts experience that. So is there information like this that applies to some of these administrative roles where we saw, more significant changes in the last year?
I do have a slide coming up speaking about specific administrator placements and assignments.
Then I will.
I don't know if you had the calculation for that piece specifically, but for administrators too, I definitely hear what you're saying, because we don't want to deny any employee an opportunity for advancement or for a promotion. And so it is a tricky balance to be able to say that when we have positions open, we never know when those might be. But this year in particular, we've made a very concerted effort to make sure that we prioritize that building administrative positions are filled before the start of the school year. And happy to report that was successful.
Thank you.
If you do want those transfer numbers, I don't have them on me. I thought I had them on me right here, but I do have them.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just didn't put them on that slide in particular. Yeah. All right. So this, I really like this slide. The reason why is because we matched up two things here: Grow Your Own Educator program and then the Apple program. The Apple program, I know Apple is spelled incorrectly. People point that out to me all the time. I didn't create the acronym. But so the alternate pathway to professional educator licensure. This is essentially what used to be ARL, or an alternate right to licensure, right? So let's take a look at that top chart first, just to kind of get an idea of where the district's Apple program has been. The reason why this program is great is because there are, at times, we do get shortages of teachers. I will say, kind of to your point earlier, Christy, about we tend to hire a lot. That means people want to come here. That's good. That is true. So there are every now and then some really hard to fill positions. We specifically see that in special education and at the secondary level in our math and science and quite often our CTE classes. The CTE in particular, because you're looking for a very specific type of license that not a lot of people have. You'll see that specifically in like some of your engineering CTE type classes, where if you got an engineering degree, you probably went into engineering, not into education. And so this Apple program has, you can kind of see on that secondary column where the number really starts to grow at the secondary level, where it goes 14, 19, 30, 37. Right? Those are the number of secondary AELs or associate educator licenses that we have in our district that are in the Apple program. And a large percentage of those do tend to be in the fields that I just said, where it's either math, science, or CTE. So you can see in 2020, 2021, we started with I guess I'll call it a small or modest amount of Apple candidates with 16. And then that year we were able to you just kind of going across there, received 5 of them received their professional licenses. That third column that says current employee, that means we had 16 at the beginning of the year, and we ended up with 11 that are still in the district that year teaching for us. So that just to give you an idea of what that column means, and then the breakdown of elementary versus secondary. And so then just going down those columns, you can see that we're currently at 50 Apple candidates in our program. I was really pleased to see that we were able to recommend 10 for professional licensure, which is awesome. You can kind of just see how we've had now at this point 23 people that I'll say graduated from the Apple program, but that means that they were able to get their professional licenses and then keep working in this wonderful profession we call teaching. And so out of the 50, we have 44 of them that are currently working in our district. So that gives you an idea of this is essentially a recruiting tool for us. We can find people that we need to fill specific positions, and then get them the help, the training, and the support to be able to get their professional licenses, and then eventually they can move into being a career status teacher in our district. Any questions about Apple program?
I think it just speaks to the fact that you're holding on to them through the process, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
So that the program is working, so that we can recruit and retain. So I love looking at, I think that's awesome.
Brian, did you have a question?
I just wanted to make sure that I understood. So when we're looking at the Apple portion of the slide, when you start with the Apple candidates at 16, and then in 2023-24, we're at 50, what you're saying is that in those 4 years, we acquired an additional 34 of them, right? You're not saying each year, like in 2021, we got 24 new ones. You're saying we went from 16 to 24. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah,
so
I think that's important for us.
So it could be a little misleading because it doesn't mean when we went from 16 to 24 that we just added 8. Because what happens is there's some transiency between each year, right? Mm-hmm. We lose a couple Apple candidates maybe because they either left the district or because they actually got their professional license. So they're not considered a part of the Apple program anymore because they have a professional license now. So going from 16 to 50, it's not that we just added that many more. I mean, actually, if you did the overall candidates, that would be a different number. It'd be larger than 50 overall.
Okay. And maybe you have answered what I was saying or what I was thinking, because so it says 16, but then the current number was 11. So that means that you lost 5
that year. Yep.
And so to get to the 24, you had to make up for the 5 along with the, so it's like like 13 or something.
So it's just like this growing thing that's kind of hard to sort of keep track of the number each year as it fluctuates, but we just keep a hard number of, we have 50 in the program right now. Those people are trying to get their professional licenses. And this is just a shout out for those of you that know Kelly May. She really helps a lot with this program. She does a lot of the mentoring. She puts a lot of the Apple plans together for all of our Apple candidates. And so I just want to recognize her for the work that she does, because she really pulls a lot of the levers to make a lot of these things happen so that these people can get their professional licenses.
Thanks for the shout out for her. She was my teacher at Bryant. Back
of course she was. She was everyone's teacher, it seems like. Surprised she wasn't my teacher. And I was educated in Texas, and so.
And real quickly, Nate, are you still going, Brian? Sorry.
Yes. Okay, so I think you also said that, so back to the 1611, the 5 that left, 5 of them may have left because they got their license.
Because they got their
and
licenses.
They got a job somewhere else or
Correct.
something.
Yep.
But some may have just decided this isn't for me or something like that, and okay.
And some do. I mean, that is the reality of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of this process. They think that they were interested in it, and then they find out.
And they find out maybe it's not for me, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, right? We just want to make sure that we're giving them all the help and support.
You're giving them the support that they need.
Right.
Thank you. And then Mohammed, I see that your hand's up. Is it up for a question on this topic, or is it still up from a previous agenda item?
My apologies. It's from before.
Thank you, Mom. Great.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Nate.
All right, and then that bottom chart is just the GYO scholarships that we've been able to, the funds we've been able to collect and then give out to individuals that are getting into the teaching profession. So I won't spend too much time here, but I think it is nice just to see the 3 cohorts we've had over the years that we've actually had the Grow Your Own program. You can see how many people, how many scholarships we gave out. And then I think the more interesting thing is if you look all the way to the right where it says current employees, that tells you how many people were in the Grow Your Own Educator program, were awarded a scholarship, and then have now been hired in the district. So that when it says, 6 teachers or 2 teachers, or, overall, was that 9 counselors, those are people that we provided GYO funds for, and they are now actually in our district with the appropriate licensure for what they went to school for. And then you could go on to the next one.
So we did get a message from the state office today that they had carryover funds from Grow Your Own, and so there's an application process to utilize those carryover funds.
So we weren't actually planning on, because we were told that the funds were out and that there wasn't going to be another Grow Your Own unless it was something was approved through legislation this year. But it looks like they have some carryover funds from the collective, and so we could apply for some additional funds this year, which we will most likely be doing. All right, let's talk about substitutes real quick. I think these numbers are great. I know that a couple of years ago there was a lot of frustration with how many vacancies we had with positions not being filled because substitutes weren't filling the jobs. When I look at these numbers, I think this is just fantastic where we are now. So you can kind of see how many sub requests we had over the last school year. 25,700 is a lot. But it's great to see that 24,300 of them were filled. That's a 94.5% fill rate, which I didn't show the historical data, but that is the highest we've ever been over the last 5 years. So just for reference. And then we currently have 484 subs in our pool right now. George O'Connor, who handles a lot of the hiring, so shout out to him because he really is the one that takes all of this, gets all of our substitutes hired, gets them on board and ready to go. Just in August alone, he hired 76 new substitutes that applied in the pool, which is, phenomenal. That's, I don't know how many work days we had in August, but that's, essentially 2 or 3 every day, right, that he's hiring. And then, so we currently have, 484, and then 367 were hired last year. So that of that 484, a lot of that is carryover into this year. George reaches out to them and says, you were in our pool last year. Are you going to be in the pool this year? And then we just re-onboard them again for the current school year. And then that's
staggering numbers, knowing that just a few years ago we only had 17,000 substitute requests per year. And so despite an increase in the number of total absences, we've also been able to, at the same time, increase the substitute fill rate as well. So definitely something that we're quite proud of. So Sam, if you could advance to the next one. I have a brief slide here to address Ashley's earlier question about administrator changes and placements. This year we had 21 different administrator placements or appointments or new hires into the district. The last 2 years we had 29 different moves, and so that was helpful. Even in the face of closing the 4 schools and having to move those 7 administrators associated with those schools, we still only had a total move of 21 for this year. And so that number is going down. I'd like to keep that at a steady going down, because the more stable we are there, that would be a helpful metric to keep track of. So definitely a good sign this year. And also, like I said earlier, prioritizing and making sure, not that it's not a priority, but making sure that those administrative positions are filled as quickly as possible. 2 of which positions became open late in the summer. We moved as quickly as possible. We even got 1 employee started working the very next day after we got their contract signed. And so just making some negotiations like that to get things moving as quick as possible to make sure our schools are staffed so that they can get rolling on the first day of school. We still have 1 current administrator opening in our special ed department, so we're working on filling that as the coordinator position. But that's going to be an ongoing recruitment effort, and we'll see about getting that filled as quickly as possible. So on to the next slide. I want to talk briefly about what our current openings look like. Right now we have 11 classified contract openings and 8 certified openings, 6 of which are special education. Many of these openings became open over the summer months. I want to say over the last year we have 55, because we didn't talk about the attrition rate for the classified staff. We had 55 openings in this last school year for our our classified contract positions, which is roughly a 10 to 11% attrition rate as well. So it's consistent between the groups. But one thing of note, we had 15 resignations in our classified contract group since July 1 of this year. And so it's a big change over the summer, which leads to those 11 positions that are still open, because many of them became open just in the last few months. 6 of them were bus drivers in August. So that's a hard thing to say. We need more bus drivers, and we had 6 of them resign all of a sudden in August, right before school started or right after school started. So that's posed a additional complication in our office for sure. And Nate has some additional data too about certified openings.
So one of the things, I can't remember if this was on a previous slide or not, Logan. I think it might have been, but if not, one of the things that I reported last year was that we were working really hard to essentially expedite our hiring processes, making sure that we're getting contracts out in a really timely manner so that we can move that process forward and get positions filled, which just means that we know our schools are staffed and we're not having to go into the late summer months. So last year, we were at about 75% getting our contracts out to employees within 48 hours. This year, we're at 84%. So, being able to increase that by essentially about 10% was a huge step for us. I was really glad to see that the certified teams really taking that goal to get these out as fast as possible, really seriously. One of the other things too that I thought was important to look at, just for some comparability purposes, to kind of get an idea of where other districts might be at in terms of current openings. We currently, you can see on this slide that we've got 8 certified openings, 6 of which are SPED. I mentioned earlier that special education it has been harder to fill those positions. It's not from lack of trying. There just is a shortage of special education teachers. So I pulled these numbers just off the websites from these different districts. So if there's something inaccurate, it was just what was publicly posted. But for comparability purposes, Granite District currently has 9 certified openings. 3 of those are SPED. Canyons has 5, none are SPED. Jordan has 12, 7 are SPED. Davis has 12, 6 are SPED. Ogden has 4, all 4 of those are SPED. Weber has 8, there's 1 that is SPED. Park City has 2, 1 that is SPED. Tooele has 13, 2 are SPED. And then we have 8 and 6 are SPED. So across the Wasatch Front, just publicly posted on the websites, that's 30 SPED positions. That makes it difficult.
Kristen?
So I appreciate you going through this. I think that first and foremost, we have to recognize that it's not just across the Wasatch Front, and it certainly isn't about Utah, it's nationwide. And I think that as we compare ourselves, it's important, to be able to say, yes, everyone's having a shortage and we're all kind of gaming for the same people, right, in order for them to come. My question really is a little bit deeper than that, so that when we know that at the level of SPED, when we look at our classrooms with our special education kids, it's one of the most critical areas. And so as our HR department, what is it that we're doing to help provide resources until those positions are filled?
So I'll share some anecdotal stuff because I think that's helpful, because this is what's currently happening, right? If you were to look at our job postings right now, you'd see that Bryant's got a posting for a SPED teacher. And so just in conversations with Dr. Amio and Dr. Jordan, who are the principal and vice principal over there, a common thing that most schools will do, and this is what they're doing, is that they do have some additional para support. So they're currently providing, so they can still provide services. So they have paras that are doing that, along with they've hired or not hired, but they have a long-term substitute that's in that position right now, which we recognize is not that's not a permanent solution, right? But at the very least, there is an adult there that can receive some additional direction from one of the other SPED teachers that helps in that program, along with the administrator support, and they can kind of help fill the gap, at least for now, until the position can be more permanently filled. So that's pretty common for other schools that are in the same positions. I know Aaron Anderson has worked really hard with a lot of these schools to provide some additional para support. So again, that students can still have some semblance or some level of services, but we recognize that it's not a permanent solution.
I appreciate you saying that. I think that first and foremost, we have to recognize, like you said, that it's not a permanent situation, but to be able to try and provide as much help and support as we possibly can at the school, I think is important. I think the other piece for me too is when I'm educated about this, then it helps me with the conversations, that come at me, because more than likely I'm going to have a conversation about our special ed, teachers at some point in time. And so I think that when I know, what the situation is, that's why I appreciated this report tonight, is to be able to, especially at the beginning of the year, to be able to at least field some of those calls, but also to know where to field them to, at the district level. And so unfortunately that means I'm always sending them to you, or to the superintendent. But I think that working on our communication on how that's helpful to parents, I'm assuming that that's also another level that's being done in coordination with you and the principals and assistant principals at the schools.
Yeah, very much so. And one other thing that I didn't say, but I think I should say is that we have a number of SPED consultants, and so they're in kind of help filling some of these gaps. Aaron Anderson does have them from time to time go in and help out a little bit more than they probably normally would, because maybe there isn't a teacher in that classroom. And so having the SPED consultants go out and provide some additional support, because they're not assigned to a specific school, they go and provide district support at various locations wherever they're assigned to. So they're being stretched a little bit thin too. I mean, this impact of not having teachers kind of permeates throughout different roles that people have in the district. So I think a credit to our SPED consultants also, who are willing to take on a little bit of additional responsibilities at this time, because that does happen.
And I think it's important to point out too that first and foremost, that any of our current vacancies or openings, there's never a classroom that's left just unattended. There's never an open hole that's not being filled and met in some way. And so there's always additional supports through ancillary support networks, through parapros, substitute teachers, consultants, district support personnel of some capacity going into those classrooms and making sure services are continually provided.
Thank you. Ashley?
Thank you for sharing some of the numbers that help us see where we are in relationship to other districts. It would be interesting, if we heard a report like this in the future, if we had time for staff who can really analyze the data to look at what's comparable. Because like Park City, I noticed you said only had 2, and then Park City has 7 schools, right, total. So it's interesting to try to do the math right now in real time and figure out what's actually comparable. So I'd be curious to know that in the future. And the other thing I might be curious to know in the future is what strategies other districts use that work or don't work, and whether they align with our district operations. For example, in some districts on October 1st, if the numbers are mismatched in a school, teachers are moved, right? Or personnel are moved. So we may see fewer vacancies overall, but we would see a very different process than what we use, which wouldn't move a teacher from one elementary school to another because of the October 1 count. So I'd be curious, again, taking these numbers, what we do with that information moving forward, and learning the next time we have a report like this too about what our processes are for that. It was really helpful. Thank you.
And we are continually monitoring student enrollment data right now with the closing of the 4 schools and so many students moving neighborhoods. Alan and I are watching very closely what student enrollment counts look like at each of our schools to see where our projections were in comparison to the reality now that we're 2 weeks into school. So we'll be doing a lot of that analysis over the next month. If you could go forward to the next and last slide. I briefly mentioned bus drivers in our transportation department. I'm ending with this slide because this is our current biggest challenge in finding enough bus drivers. I'm proud to say that we've hired 10 bus drivers since July, but as I mentioned earlier, 6 other bus drivers have already resigned in that same amount of time. So we take a little step forward, and it's very difficult to keep up with. And much like the special ed teacher issue, where there just aren't enough, it's the same thing with certified bus drivers. Even though we are able to provide the CDL training in order to receive that heightened certification for a CDL driver's license, it's still very difficult to find employees who want to do that job and stick with it. We currently have 72 different routes and only 64 contract drivers. One thing that we are doing that's new this year is that we have a few routes that have so few students, it's potential they could be transported in a small van that is a 10 passenger or less. And so what we're doing is trying to hire some additional drivers that don't have to have a CDL and drive a big yellow school bus, but could still transport students in a smaller van, much like we do currently for our CTE program, and moving students from one school to another. So that's something that's underway right now, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to fill those positions really quickly. Some things that have helped, I'm also, before the meeting started, I saw 2 recommendations to hire new bus drivers come in just this afternoon, and so that's a positive look in the right direction, but we just need to keep going. In order to get there, some of the recruitment efforts that we've been implementing, we have a referral incentive so that current bus drivers or anybody in the transportation department can refer a friend into the position. If they have somebody that they've recommended to get hired into a bus driver position, they can receive a monetary compensation for that as an incentive to encourage others to apply. We're continuously advertising locally and nationally, both on the KSL advertisements, but also in a larger network as well. And we're also sending out several posts, thanks to Yandere and the communications team, through Parent Square and the district newsletter as well, just trying to get the word out. And so if anybody knows anybody who would like to drive students, we've got positions. Give us a call. So with that, I want to see if there's any other further questions.
Brian?
I'd like to go back to the slide with the substitutes on it for just a minute.
Yeah.
This has really been helpful. I appreciate this report.
To the one on
When
substitutes,
I was looking
right
at
there.
the substitute data, I think that it's wonderful that we've got a 95% fill rate. I'm reflecting back when I was in the classroom during COVID and had a health issue, and I had to have some surgery, and it was really difficult to find someone to take the class. My question is, when it says that you have 25,724 requests and you've met 24,000, so there's like 1,400 or something like that that didn't get met. Does that mean that, like, the teacher that was requesting just said, well, I'll be there that day teaching, or what was happening? Were the children being divided between other teachers? What happens when those requests aren't met?
So to clarify, being that it's a substitute request that's recorded, that means it went through and that was an absence for that teacher for that day.
Okay.
To answer the second part of the question, it depends on the school, whether they were able to cover it with another teacher, or if they split students between classes, or in a secondary school they would have one teacher cover and provide some additional compensation. It would really depend on the school, but for those 1,400 or so absences that weren't covered by an actual substitute coming in, those would be a variety of ways that they would need to be covered in some other
there are
manner.
a number of ways to address that.
Exactly. Might be the principal going into
Right, or
do it for a while as well.
The counselor or the secretary.
Yep.
We see all sorts of things. The other question that I had was, do you have a way of seeing, so it shows 484 substitutes are in your sub pool. Do you have a way of seeing which substitutes are being used all the time, because that's another experience that I had. I mean, you know that there are certain substitutes that you are really confident in how they're going to be able to manage your classroom and teach your students and all of those. It would just be interesting for me to know, is part of the reason some of them aren't getting filled is we have some substitutes that are in high demand. Do you see what I'm saying? Some are really in high demand, and others aren't being used as much. And is there a way that we can help those substitutes, you know, maybe give them additional support or additional training and how to be more successful in the classroom?
I think there's multiple questions there.
Yeah, there are multiple questions. Yeah.
But to address that, their substitute teaching is essentially the original gig economy. Some substitutes like teaching as much as possible.
Yeah.
Others say, I'm only going to substitute at my child's school on Mondays.
Right.
And so it can vary anywhere in between the two extremes like that. There is training available through the Salt Lake Community College that we encourage substitute teachers to take advantage of. But also there's support through our office as well. Like Nathan was mentioning, George O'Connor is wonderful about helping substitutes connect with open job openings. And so it all depends on when the opening is entered into the system. If it's 30 minutes before school starts, it's highly unlikely it's going to get filled.
Yeah.
But if it's far enough advance, our substitute pool is large enough that there's enough calls that are going out to have that successful fill rate. So it's a multifaceted issue where, yes, there needs to be some additional training to help substitutes feel successful. But that's also balanced with the fact that some want to work occasionally when they want to, and some want to work as much as possible. And so trying to balance that all is really only possible through having a very large subpool. I don't know if I answered all the questions.
Well, you did, and I guess what I was getting at was, I think that there are some substitutes out there that would like to work more, but they need some additional support, so they would be requested more, is what I'm getting at. And so I'm hoping that in our system, and you explained to me that, yeah, there are opportunities for them to get additional training and direction. We want them to be successful so that, you know, they're requested again and again.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for Logan and Nate? All right, thank you guys for joining us this evening and putting the presentation together. Appreciate your
for the
time.
opportunity.
Board President Salazar,
Yes.
because before we move on, I wanted to say, because neither discussion item had documents prepared the Friday prior to our business meeting as outlined in our handbook, and to advance our mutual purpose with the superintendent of having meaningful, well-informed discussion, I want to move that we table the 2 discussion items until our next business meeting so that we have sufficient time to review the materials before our conversation. It's my understanding that if this motion receives a second, it's not debatable and we would immediately vote.
Well, I would follow the board process on that. Board Member Anderson, and if you're wanting to make a motion, then I would entertain that.
I move that we table the items until our next business meeting for the reasons stated.
Second.
Per what Ashley mentioned relative to our board process and policies, it is not debatable, so I will not be opening the board up to opportunity to discuss both of these, or to discuss the motion, excuse me. And we'll seek a vote, starting with Board Member Sika. Board Member Anderson.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, no. Mohammed?
Mohammed, yes.
Right.
Motion to table, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
And Jenny?
Hello?
There is a motion on the table to table the 2 discussion items, 1 and 2.
Yeah, yes.
All right, that motion passes. We will table these to the next school board meeting on September 17th. With
Can
that,
I clarify that?
please.
So the motion was for the next business meeting,
Okay.
which will not be till October 1.
October. Okay. Thank you, Alan, for that clarification. Let's see, moving on, we don't have anything on the action agenda. Superintendent, do you have a report for us this evening? I know that we've had some connection issues.
I do, yes. Just to note some of the great work going on to get schools up and running this school year. It happens every year that schools get going, but sometimes we have some bumps in the road. Certainly the most prevalent one this year was getting the busing up and going and getting that right. The problem was kind of this perfect storm event of changing schools and moving programs and a software package that was not accessible early enough for us to test it and run it before school started. And so just huge shout outs to Ken Martinez in Transportation, Isaac Gastel in Auxiliary Services for the amount of hours they put in to try and get this right. I mean, it's just been remarkable what they've had to do to get the busing right. I believe we're on a pretty good path now. Ken reported just this morning that he's taking some of these routes to make sure that the kids are picked up and dropped off appropriately in that time. And so I think it's taken us a handful of weeks, but we've finally got it settled mostly. And just want to thank parents for those who were productive in sharing the information and helping us get those cleaned up. So that's maybe the biggest piece to report. Also, I know when we just heard from HR, principals are congratulating them and thanking them for getting the positions filled quickly before the school year starts. I know they had that as a priority, and principals have expressed their appreciation for that. So all of that, along with some electricity problems at Mountain View that we're still working out when the best problem is to change a breaker in Mountain View, and Isaac and his team are working with Principal Jason Finch there to arrange that so it's the least disruptive process possible. That we will have to turn off the electricity in Mountain View in order to remove the broken breaker and put in a new one. That may take a couple days, but we're staying in touch with the school to see when that might be best scheduled and all. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Alan, do you have a BA report this evening?
So I just want to note, so after being in this temporary office space for 2+ years, the new district office is nearing completion. We'll begin moving operations of the district office next week to that building. And I'll emphasize again, I said in my presentation that our next board meeting held on September 17th, which will also be the public hearing for the bond, will be held at the new district office in the boardroom. Again, that address is 406 East, 100 South. See?
Been a couple years, man.
Or the corridor of 4th East to 1st South. We'll be posting all that on our webpage, make sure that the public knows that operations will be moving back to that site starting next week.
Thank you, Alan. Board members, any board member reports? Brian.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to report in my assignment to USBA to make you aware of some things. I sent out to you an email that was telling you about a webinar that is available tomorrow, which I think is beneficial. You all now have the announcement in your email, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then I would ask, are you getting those emails? Because they have assured me that they're going to you individually, but sometimes I feel like you're not getting everything. Okay. So I just want to make sure that, okay, great. Next, I will be attending a Utah School Board Association Executive Committee meeting on September 13th, and I'll report to you on that in our next board meeting. Then reminding you that on September 23rd through the 27th, that is the Legislator Day in the Classroom that has been planned and supported by USBA. Then you just need to be aware that there are going to be our fall regional meetings, and they will be the very end of September and October. I have not received a date yet on when the Salt Lake one is. Hopefully I'll have it by our next board meeting on the 17th. But I want to encourage us to be to those, because I think that that really is valuable for us to participate in those regional meetings, the board as well as the superintendent. When I've been there, we've done some good work. I think Christy would agree with that as well. The final thing that I would, well, no, there are two more things. I will be at a board of directors meeting on October 4th. But then please remember that we have our master board certification, and that is due in December. And some of you were on your third and fourth level. Ashley and I were on our second level. Or anyway, you can move ahead, but just make sure. I think it was really wonderful that last year everyone on our board had completed their certification. Thank you for that. Then a report on the policy committee. We have not met since our last board meeting, but I guess I would just interject because we have tabled some things for a conversation in our next business meeting. One of them was related to district property considerations, and there was a reference made in there to board policy G5, policy related to property use and the closing of schools. When you look at the AP, the administrative procedures, there is a broad explanation on how you would proceed with your discussion on properties from closed schools. It seems to me like the appropriate approach would be to go to the policy committee and look at the preparation of administrative procedures so that we have a process that we're following when we do this. It seems to me like the district and the board is successful when they are following a process, so that there isn't a question as to, well, how did you do this? And we may need to look further at the development of the process, because we haven't had this for a number of years. And then my final report would be the board handbook committee. We did meet, and there were some revisions that are being drafted. Christy can probably speak to this as well in her report, but we're working on some revisions that are related to SEC and some other, and I appreciate Christina helping us with those revisions.
And Brian, just to seek some clarification, I know we're not in the discussion, but are you looking for the board's direction to the superintendent that you would like a process-oriented type of discussion on building utilization? And
I think that would be helpful.
is that something that the board's in agreement to?
Say that one more time, a little louder. I couldn't.
Oh,
hear you.
is that something that the board is in agreement to provide that direction to the superintendent and to the BA to bring a discussion, a process-oriented discussion about capital facilities, properties, how we utilize vacant buildings or unused buildings to the policy subcommittee for a process-oriented discussion.
Right. I think that it's important, that's one of the reasons that we set up that, committee. And I think having an initial discussion that we're prepared to have to help provide some, whatever we want to call it, guidelines, guardrail, whatever we want to say. But I think that, looking at what we have already established, what's established, although it's loose as we've come to find out, in state code, that to send it back to the policy committee and have them then come forward to us and then have that robust conversation as a board, since we're the policymakers of our district.
Do other board members feel the same?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank
Ashley?
you, that's my report.
So the Finance Committee recently met, and we had some preliminary discussions of the job requests, which we just tabled. Christy and I had both provided feedback that we would specifically like more information about the CTE programs offered in our secondary schools, information like student enrollment, FTE in our schools, and not only the administrative flow chart, which we looked at in the discussion. The committee also reviewed the final report from the internal auditors and had no questions or concerns for them. They recommended a central compliance function for things like grant deadlines, state requirements, et cetera. And we were supportive of their findings. We also hoped to discuss, but didn't quite get to on our agenda, some additional items, including some of the new software and applications the board had elected to pay for this year after they went through our committee, and review some past expenditures that we may want to reconsider now that we're using some of those new tools. It also seems like school has been in session for quite a while, even though it has really only been 2 weeks. And I would typically lead with a lot of school pleasantries, and I would be remiss, however, not to mention that I've continued to hear some parent concerns about the registration process in our secondary schools. So hearing how excellent the HR report was today, I would like to consider in the future hearing kind of other departmental updates in our meetings. I think those ongoing reports could help us make good decisions to support our greatest areas of need. For example, if we heard from some, like secondary school area director, we may find out about our options for things like arena scheduling or different things that would really ease the process this year that was very difficult for some of our parents and students.
Yeah, Ashley. Bryce?
Yeah, I just have one thing. This coming Thursday, today's Tuesday. Thursday, the 5th, I will be attending a media center makeover reveal at Newman Elementary. I'm really excited about this. I've been hearing rumblings of this for a couple of months now, and this is happening in collaboration with the Education Foundation and the Big 12 conference. So looking forward to that.
Thank you. Student Board Member Helena, do you have any updates?
I think one interesting thing has been the weapons detectors at my school. There was something regarding the staffing situation. So now we have some administration searching bags and things like that. And I have heard from other students that the idea of dignity in your school is being helped by not having a third party checking your bags. And that's something that people would like me to express. So, yeah.
Thank you for expressing the thoughts and feelings of your colleagues and student colleagues at West. Thank you. Christy?
I think that's so important. Thank you for saying that. Kind of reminds me of that we probably need to do some sort of more often fact sheets. This is how it was started. This is where it's at. This is why it, we need to do a better job of that. So thank you, Helena, for saying that. I was asked a question recently and then directed to a podcast that I just wanted to share briefly with all of you tonight. I think that one of the things that we're always asked about is why is it important for our school environments to be good environments? It's crucial to our students' success. And so there were 6 areas that were identified. Academic achievement. A positive school environment fosters better academic performance when students feel safe, supported, and motivated. Emotional and social development. Schools play a significant role in the emotional and social development of students. A supportive environment helps students develop self-confidence. Mental health. A good school environment contributes to the mental well-being of students. When students feel valued and understood, they are less likely to experience stress, anxiety, or depression. Behavior and discipline. In a positive environment, students are more likely to exhibit good behavior and respect for rules. Long-term success. The values, habits, and skills developed in a positive school environment in a positive school environment can carry over into adulthood. Students are more likely to become responsible, well-adjusted adults who contribute positively to society. And last, a sense of belonging. A good school environment fosters a sense of belonging and community. When students feel they are part of something larger, they are more likely to be engaged and motivated to succeed. I would just ask that when we think about these 3 goals that we're going to be entertaining, as long-term five-year goals for us to look at as a board and a district, which lead itself into that. When you think about, chronic absenteeism, it's a perfect segue into a lot of these conversations. And I would just hope that as we go into that conversation, that we think about the students that we represent, the employees that we represent, the environments that we are creating at our level for our schools, and that we don't take lightly these board goals and how important they are, to us and to our students. I just wanted to share with you, I hope that each of you open up your USBA newsletter, because Terry Rhodes had the greatest little snippet at the beginning about her granddaughter and just how excited she was, to be in kindergarten. And that excitement, is still in my little 3rd grader, when I picked her up from Nibley today, and how excited she was about, her principal and her new teacher and, all the little things that they get to do. And when she came out today, I said, "How was your day today?" She goes, "It was the best day ever, Grandma." And that's what we want, right? We want our kids to be able to say to us, yes, they're going to have their ups and downs and their bumps, but wouldn't that be great? So that you could always say, "It was the best day ever." Thanks.
Thank you, Christy. I appreciate that. I don't have a report this evening, but I do want to let the community and the board know that we do need to re-enter our closed executive session, and I've asked Vice President Williams to read that. Oh, Mohammed or Jenny? I'm so sorry. Do you have any board member reports?
I do.
Okay, go for it, Jenny, and then Mohammed.
Well, actually, I don't have a board member report, but I do have a question on what do I have to do to have the board visit this Westside High School, and what would it look like if I were to, beckon the district to help my community out to get a broad version of actually a real number of who would like this Westside High School?
I think we could certainly entertain that offline, board member Sika, but in order to have an agenda item relative to a Westside High School on the agenda for public discussion, I'd like to refer you to our board policies that govern agenda development and setting, and would ask that you make a formal request to board leadership with a second from another board member to support your request. And then Bryce and I would have 2 meetings in order to get that on an agenda for a discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Board Member Bade?
First of all, I want to say thank you to all the principals and assistant principals and staff, everyone that was involved in making sure that our kids are getting back to school safely. Yes, mishaps do happen on the first day or first week, but nevertheless, it is nice to go and visit some schools and see parents, especially some schools whose kids have has transitioned to go in there because of school closures, and just meeting the parents and talking to them and making sure that they understand that that the board is really taking into consideration making sure that their kids are safe and continuing to receive the best education. I also want to extend a thanks to bus drivers, for the time they have put in and navigating the traffic jam, especially on the first day of returning to school. But it was nice to see those kids getting out of the buses, especially those who are coming from schools who are closing, and just seeing those kids, they're kids. They're having a good time. They're enjoying it. And I want to make sure that our community understand as well, that I absolutely understand the heartbreak of having a school being closed. And also, I empathize with their, with the anxiety that comes with this. And again, I want to reiterate to our community that please, if there is anything that's going to be happening with the schools, it is going to be in the public meetings, and we'll make sure that the community is involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. And as I mentioned, we do have a need for to re-enter closed executive session, and Bryce has volunteered to go ahead and read that motion.
Yep. I move that on September 3rd, 2024 at 7:17 p.m., the board go into closed executive session to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual, pending or imminent litigation, and the deployment of security personnel devices or systems. And that we conclude the session once the business is over.
Thank you. And Mohammed, I heard you with a second there. Is that still the case?
Yes.
All right. Any discussion to the motion on the table? Seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Jensen.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Siga, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Excellent. Thank you, community, for joining us this evening. We'll prepare the room for the closed session. What's that? My. Yeah, I just realized that.